Oh, is it?
Oh.
So we've got a new graphics card to take a look at here from PowerColor. This is, well, you guys have already seen this one. This is a 5700 XT Red Devil. The Red Devil series has always been their top end, air-cooled, triple fan, best bend, highest clocking, most power draw cards that they've got. This is like their top of the line. Well, until today, because now we're taking a look at the new 5700 XT Liquid Devil. It's basically the Red Devil, but less red and more liquid. Building upon their highly popular H-Series cases, the new H210i, 510i, 510 Elite, and 710i from NZXT offer a sleek yet functional chassis for PC enthusiasts. Ample interior space and airflow make the H-Series the perfect choice for both air cooling as well as water cooling, while the intelligent features offer integrated temperature monitoring and lighting control seamlessly. To learn more about the H-Series chassis from NZXT for your next build, head to nzxt.com. So this right here is actually a 5700 XT, I almost said Founders Edition. It's a reference card, but with an EK water block on it. So basically we took the basic blower cooler off and installed our own block, and we reused the factory backplate on there because it does mount up and it looks really good. But you know, this still has the inherent drawbacks of not being necessarily the most bend. You play the lottery, the silicon lottery, you never know what you're gonna get. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But what you also have to do then is incur the cost of a water block, and then you avoid your warranty potentially. So what PowerColor's done with the Liquid Devil is they basically took, like I said, all their top tiered bin CPU silicon and then made a whole nother graphics card out of it. Now the reason why I'm taking out the Red Devil here is I want to compare the PCBs, because I'm not entirely sure if it's just a Red Devil with a water cooler or a water block slapped on it. Now one other thing I want to point out too right now is you guys have been messaging me asking where my coverage of the 3950X is. AMD had very limited quantity of those, and they've sort of dispersed them, and unfortunately I guess we didn't win the Wheelo review name, and it wasn't our name. But that's okay, because we are gonna be covering the Threadripper stuff, which we're really excited about, because I think Phil and I might both be making the switch back to AMD for our studio systems, and we're gonna see what happens when you take a 32 core monster and just brute force your way through editing. But that's coming up in a future piece of content. So this is the Liquid Devil right here. Now this is a collaboration with EK. So EK, these are EK water blocks, but as you can see, they have got custom covers and stuff on them, which are very much part of the aesthetics. We've got, oh, die packs. Okay, so obviously you're gonna be, and not the kind of die pack that goes in like say a bank robbery. So if you are building a loop from scratch, they already include dies, unless you've already kind of figured out what it is you want to do, and you already have dies, then you don't have to use those. So here it is right here. You can see it's definitely an EK water block. You can tell by the terminal right there. It's got a nice backplate. As you can see, it's just got a brushed Devil logo there. It's got a nice gunmetal in black. It's matte finish. It's not crazy or gaudy or in your face. But we've got to do the obligatory peel. Are you ready? Okay. 10-phase power delivery system versus 7 phases found on the reference design. It's got two BIOS. It's got the OC BIOS, so no matter what, you're getting overclocks. And it's got the Unleashed BIOS. Now you might be asking yourself, well, what's the difference between OC and Unleashed? I mean, OC almost sounds like it's unleashed as it is. Well, the difference here is the power limit. So we've got up to 230 watts power draw on the OC BIOS and 270 watts on the Unleashed. Considering the fact that it's a water-cooled card, you're only gonna be using it in a water loop. I can't see myself, or can't see anyone using the OC BIOS. Just use the Unleashed. Having multiple BIOS, I guess, could be good for recovery and stuff like that if you ever have an issue. But cards like this, I feel like just ship with one BIOS, the fast one. That's all that matters. This is the same, exact same PCB as found on the Red Devil. You've got two 8-pin power plugs that are required. The BIOS button for the Red Devil, though, is a silent BIOS versus an OC BIOS. So that has to do with fan RPM. Obviously with this guy here, it increases our power limit, which is gonna get us better clocks. Speaking of clocks, it is advertised as up to 2070 megahertz. So I'm really curious to see how that goes. And here's a size comparison. So you can see it is a shorter but taller graphics card, meaning probably better compatibility in terms of small form factor cases if you have the depth to handle the taller card plus the terminal. So what we've gotta do now is we've gotta go ahead and mock up a loop for this thing real quick. And then we are gonna be doing some overclocking and temperature testing, because the 5700 XT with the reference cooler was definitely a furnace, but that was more so the cooler's fault. The aftermarket boards with even the fan coolers have definitely been doing a really good job. So let's go ahead and mock something up here. Now let's make it purple. Also too, as you can see, we have some nice red glowing LEDs. They are not set to rainbow puke out of the box, but there is additional software you need to download from PowerColor if you want to change the colors on this. We're not gonna be going into that. We covered that on the Red Double card. If you're curious about that and how that software works or just what the different modes look like, you can go watch that video. But that's kind of a good thing and a bad thing regarding this card already, is if when you add another block to a card that's got RGB control, you get a pigtail that comes out of it, like we have with our Radeon card, our reference card. Then you can plug it into a motherboard header or a splitter or whatever, control it with whatever software you want, Mystic Light, Aura, or whatever third party that you're using is. When it's baked in like this and it's being controlled through PCI Express, then you've got to run whatever proprietary software there is. So heads up, there's probably another piece of RGB software you have to add to your computer if you want to control the colors on this. Unless you're just going for a red theme, then it's already done. Which is kind of funny considering it's a blue box that I think they should have maybe done blue to keep things consistent. But that's just a minor little gripe there. So we are going to go ahead and use Afterburner for this because it works just as well and it's just as supported with AMD graphics cards. We can see right off the bat, we have core voltage control right here, which goes all the way up to 1.3 volts. We're gonna leave that right where it's at. Power limit, it maxed out at an additional 50% power limit. As we already said at the beginning of this, there are two different power limits on this card based on the BIOS, 230 for OC or 270 for Unleashed. We are obviously on the Unleashed BIOS. At least that's where I make sure I didn't switch it again. Yes, we are on the Unleashed, so that's important. And then I like that they made the print on that nice and big so you can actually read it and not need to get like a microscope to read it like some of the brands do. 2084 is where it's kind of set to allow it to go. This number right here is not a hard cap. With AMD, it is not like NVIDIA, where you are controlling an offset. With AMD, you're giving it a target. But with AMD, you're not guaranteed to get that target because it has other things it has to consider, like voltage and temperature and power draw. The memory clock is still sitting at 875, which I think might actually be reference. And then our fan is set to 100 because that's default out of the box. So let's go ahead and see what we're getting right now. Let's go ahead and load up some superposition. Actually, no, we're gonna do heaven first. So right away, it went to 2034 megahertz. And you can see it sort of bouncing around. Our edge temp and our junction temperature are at 35 and 48. This is a 30 mil by 240 radiator with two fractal design case fans on here. These are not even the highest static pressure fan you can put on here. They're also only running at 70%. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe these are 12 or 1300 RPM fans. They are not the fastest. But I've always said, a 120 millimeter worth of radiator per component if factory, and 240 per overclock. So if you're gonna overclock your part, go with at least a 240. So I'm kind of sticking with that methodology I've always sort of adopted. And then you've got an EK tower res right there, which has got a D5 and a reservoir built into it, running just distilled water with some dye. So it's not even like a premix or anything like that. When you're dealing with water, because it has a massive thermal capacity, it takes time for it to fully reach its maximum temperatures. As the temperature of the loop increases, so will the graphics card temperatures. So we're gonna let this run for 10 minutes is usually good enough for a single component like this. And then once we see that line plateaus, then we'll see what those temperatures are. Maybe we'll play with the fan speed a little bit. But what I wanna see is what the maximum overclock achievable is gonna be on this. So let's go ahead and let the temperatures maximum. All right, so here's how long the test was running. Our temperatures have pretty much leveled out. Looks like our max edge temp is 45 and our max junction temp was 59. Now that's peak. It is still running a full 100% and we didn't lose any clocks, as you can see right there. That's amazing. I wish that was always the case, but we didn't lose any clocks there. So our temperatures though are realistically more around 44 to 56 or so. But what I'm kind of curious about right now is what happens if I increase the power limit. So just increasing the power limit, what does that do to our clock? Absolutely nothing. Okay, so it says up to 2070, and as you can see, it's set to 2084 right now. We're getting 2034. So I'm not sure now if that's voltage limit or if that's gonna be, it's not power limit, it can't possibly be power limit. So what if I make that randomly 2100? Because remember, we are kind of moving a whole curve up. So it's not really the same as like GPU boost on NVIDIA, but we are actually creating a curve increase. So if I apply that at 2100, 2050, so we went up, it looks like a whole table there, 2120. Now, one of the things that's different if you do this through the actual global Wattman is you can set a minimum target as well, which we can't technically do with Afterburner. So by not being able to set a minimum is allowing it to still have room to kind of fluctuate the core clocks as you're kind of seeing right here. But what we also found is by locking the minimum and the maximum, we got a lot of crashes that way. So I'm just kind of seeing what Afterburner is capable of here. I want to see if we can hit 2100. Oh wow, that went right to 2150 once I hit 2200 there. So it seems to be staying about 50 below that, but there's 2150. Let's do 2120. I want to see where it's gonna crash, man. Oh wow, that dropped down significantly right there. It was at 20, oh, I went backwards. When you reduce the numbers, the clocks go down with it. So the slider will go past it, but 2200 is where we're kind of maxing out right there. 2700. Nah, see, it won't let me go past 2200, so it's kind of a false slider. All right, what about memory? Memory is one of the things that's super hard for overclocking on AMD, but because the memory is also being cooled by the water block, because it is touching the memory, we might be able to get a pretty decent overclock on the memory here. We'll go straight to 950. AMD memory tends to give you artifacts, like all over the screen and stuff. Stop, stop. Stop. And you'll get it with NVIDIA cards too, but for some reason, the way the logic works between the memory and the die, or the GPU die, is you tend to get a lot more artifacts that you can kind of recover from, which is kind of nice. So 950 is already significantly higher than we got with our reference card. Anything over like 900, I think 925 was like an instant crash. And then 950 is where it's capping us right there. See, if I go 960, like 975, and hit apply, it goes right back to 950. So we've maxed out the sliders, at least in Afterburner. Now let's see what happens to the temperatures if we bring down the voltage. And if we can maintain stability at 2200 target and a 950 target for the memory, what happens if it brings down to like 1100? Because it was at, oh, yeah. I might have gone a little too aggressive. Look, if the core clock is stable and the memory is stable at the voltage out of the box and the temperatures are really good, there's no reason to really touch the voltage. All right, so we know we can get 2150 out of that. Can we make it through our testing suite right now with 1440p? I'm not gonna do 4K. I'm just curious as to where this stacks up at 1440p. This would be the ultimate 1440p gaming card. You could probably do some 4K gaming on this with like mix of medium high settings, maybe. But I still, I think 1440p would be definitely ultra settings, kind of the sweet spot for this card. So we just went through all of our benchmarks, or at least for 1080 and 1440. I know I said I was only gonna do 1080. I decided to do 1440 as well. Actually, no, the other way around. I said I was only gonna do 1440. I decided to do 1080 because it's still the dominant resolution. Now look, here's the bottom line. This card costs $599. That's a lot of money. And I know, so usually a block costs $100 for full cover block. Sometimes 120, 130, depending on which brand you go with. EK is a premium brand, and therefore with it is going to be a bit of a premium price point. Now it's better than the Red Devil, obviously, because it's water cooled. And the fact that it's water cooled meant our temperatures were amazing. You saw our edge temp and our junction temperatures. Well, our max junction temperature, if we take a look at the chart right now, because it's still up from when we ran all these tests, our max junction temperature was 69, and that was going to be, that's during like some of the really intensive tests we did, like 1440 while overclocked. So still less than 70 degrees for our junction temperature on here on a graphics card that we've seen get pretty darn hot in other tests when, like, especially with the factory cooler. Now here's the thing that makes this kind of difficult. This is the best AMD currently has to offer. If you look at the CPU side of stuff, they've really caught up to Intel and surpassed them in terms of core density at the same price point versus Intel, especially when it comes to mainstream. And then Threadripper is just like, that's just encroached entirely on their Xeon market, let alone desktop, like the high performance desktop. What we've learned here is that the graphics card division really needs a higher tier card than the 5700 XT, because the problem is that $599 puts you deep into the most expensive 2070 Super cards that are out there. And the 2070 Super Founders Edition card was actually beating this card non-overclocked. This card overclocked versus a non-overclocked 2070 Super, which is going to be one of the slowest cards of the bunch, especially, you know, considering once you put better cooling on anything and you get your custom BIOS and stuff for the AIBs and you start getting these faster cards. This only won in Firestrike and Far Cry 5. Well, Firestrike's just a synthetic benchmark that really doesn't paint the picture, which is why we do game testing as well. In Far Cry 5, it won by 1 and 2 FPS, non-overclocked versus overclocked, again, versus a 2070 Super Founders Edition non-overclocked. So adding a water block to a 5700 XT makes it a graphics card that is, I feel, although a great enthusiast card for diehard AMD fanboys, it puts it in a price tier that it can't compete. So it's a good card, and I definitely applaud PowerColor for sticking with their Devil series, which has always been among the best AMD products that you can buy for Radeon. It's just, it then becomes very difficult for me to say, yeah, you should definitely go out and buy this card. I feel like the person that would run out and buy this card is the person that is just like, I will never own an NVIDIA product. I do not want NVIDIA. Plain and simple. And there are people out there that feel that way about certain brands, and that's fine. It's your money, you spend it where you want. But if you are a performance enthusiast and you were just going, I don't care, green, blue, Intel obviously, or red, AMD, I want the best performance I can get for my money, this doesn't beat a 2070, or 2070 Super. And I don't know if you can still get 2070s. I think they're actually bringing them back now. NVIDIA is bringing back the 2070 non-Super because, you know, why not, I guess. So what we need to see, AMD, is not a 5500, we need a 5900. We need a card that can compete with the 2080 series. We need more stream processors crammed into these guys. And they promise that those graphics cards are coming in the future. At least that's what they've said. It's like they're really likening the 5000 series graphics cards to that of Ryzen, and that this is the first tier product and it's going to only get better in the next couple of years. Well, right now at $599, the Liquid Devil is definitely the most expensive 5700 XT that you could buy. Probably one of the most well thought out and well built. The problem is it can still only go as fast as AMD's architecture will allow, and that's where it's being held back. Yeah, I was hoping for more, and it definitely overclocks well, but as you could see, even our core, we can't go beyond 2200, and you're gonna make up for that distance and that gap between the 2070 Super with core speed, and unfortunately at even 2150, it's not enough. So that has been it. That is our look at the PowerColor Liquid Devil. The best water-cooled 5700 XT that you can buy with a warranty and a water block pre-installed. Whether or not it's worth it to you though, only you can answer that. So guys, hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Hopefully it taught you something. Sound off in the comments below how you feel about this. How do you feel about, again, I hate using the term mid-tier card, but in terms of what you can spend, this truly is in the middle, because $1,200 for a 2080 Ti, $600 for this guy. You can't buy a card for zero, but that would still be the middle, right? So how do you feel about these cards that are more expensive than their competitors and slower for the sake of like water cooling and stuff like that? I've always said, never water cool a graphics card if it means that the money you would spend on the water cooling keeps you from buying the next top tier card or the next higher tier card. You don't have one of those with AMD. So that's kind of why this sort of exists. So how do you feel about that? Sound off in the comments below. And as always, guys, thanks for watching. You know why it smells good.